It shall be the policy of the United States government that there will be two biological genders and that those genders are male and female. And with those words during his inauguration speech, Donald Trump launched the end of the era of weaponized victimization. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. And gentlemen, an observation to make about wokeism and the rhetorical genius of the evil people on the far progressive left. One of the very first realizations that I had, and one of the first speaking points that I would do when I first started public speaking 12, 13 years ago, was the realization that when you call somebody a racist, the only person that shuts up when you call them a racist are people who aren't racist. Yeah. Actual racists are proud of being racist. They wear armbands or they wear white hoods with eye holes cut in them. You call a Ku Klux Klan member a racist or an actual Nazi a racist, and they'll say, well, of course I'm a racist. The people who shut up when you call them racists are people who are so appalled by the idea of racism that they will, in fact, take a knee and shut their mouth because they don't like being called something that they find repugnant and repellent. And this is the genius on the left of political correctness. The idea that we can intimidate people into silence by accusing them of things that they aren't, by making ourselves into victims. And we see this with the Black Lives Matter movement, but especially in the last several years, we've been seeing it with the trans rights movement. Steve, I maintain that the reason that wokeism got as far as it got, and I think we're well past peak woke, but I think the reason it got as far as it got was because if you listen to trans activists, and I'm talking about the trans movement as opposed to actual transsexuals who want no attention whatsoever. The people who are genuinely transsexual, the last thing they want, the idea, for example, of a person wearing an evening dress with a beard is anathema to people with genuine gender dysphoria. It just drive them just completely insane. So those are the people I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people with the beards and the evening gowns. I maintain that while people like that, trans activists say how cruel and how uncaring the American people are, the normies, I maintain that woke got as far as it got because most people are kind and fair-minded and don't want the idea of somebody to have to live in a closet, don't like the idea that somebody has to be, conforming to somebody else's view of who they are, that most people are sympathetic to the idea of, I just want to be this way, this is who I am, leave me alone. And if they had just settled for that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But it was weaponized. The trans movement became a new class of victims, and to be perfectly honest with you, Steve, I think that the trans movement was essentially invented so that white people could be victims too. I don't know how to put it more plainly than that.
Well, there are a lot of different elements, and I think that's definitely one of them. Another is So I've long supported gay marriage, but I thought it should be done on a trial basis at the state level because this was something new. And as you talked about in Scott's segment this week, America is in a land of competing ideas, and part of that is each state is a laboratory of democracy. And let's try those ideas out, see what works, see what doesn't. And instead, of course, we got this stupid, illegitimate Supreme Court decision that forced this idea that I supported, at least on a trial basis, forced it on the whole nation in a one-size-fits-all basis. And one of the things that happened was this victory came very quickly and very unexpectedly for the organizations like, what's it called, the HRC, the Human Rights, what's the big gay rights organization? I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, they were flush with all this cash and
big gay
and nothing to do. And so they kind of glommed on to this idea of transsexualism as a civil right because it's just like what happened with Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Hey, here's a noble effort. Let's make drunk driving a social and legal stigma so that drunks aren't out there killing one another and other people on the roads. Wouldn't that be nice? Sure. And in fairly short order, drunk driving became a social stigma and came with new huge legal penalties, and the number of people killed in drunk driving incidents cratered. Hey, good going. Let's pat ourselves on the back and dissolve MAD. No, that's not what happens. We've got an organization. We've got salaries. We've got influence. We're going to keep doing stuff. And so MAD went from being Mothers Against Drunk Drivers to angry women wanting to stop you from having any kind of fun whatsoever. And it just became the worst sort of nanny state organization. And for all the good they did in the 80s and 90s, I want that organization to just shut up and fly away. And the same thing kind of happened. So one of the elements is that with all this money, male perverts, I'm not talking about people with gender dysphoria, they're victims. Male perverts saw an opportunity to use their newfound victimhood to get themselves into women's locker rooms, to get themselves into women's bathrooms, to flaunt their sexuality and to wear their dresses and their beards and their bald heads and all the rest, and to claim legal victimhood. Well, they weren't the victims. These are people who should be doing what they want to do in private, just like the rest of us. They were creating victims out of the rest of us by using this legal billy club, to beat the rest of us over the head, to normalize public deviancy of every imaginable kind, and to end the concept of women's spaces because it turns these guys on to be in those spaces. The victims were the women. The victims were the society that got corrupted by this fake sense of victimhood for guys who should really be parading around their own bedrooms with the curtains drawn instead of around the White House.
Yeah, and what they do in their own bedrooms with the curtains drawn is none of my business.
Exactly.
I don't particularly care what they do. But what we found, Scott, was that there was an entire political agenda attached to the trans movement. When Dylan Mulvaney is invited to the White House, and we saw some of the messaging that came out of the White House with all of this stuff, it basically took a perceived victim class. The way that it was laid out was that these trans people, again, I'm not talking about genuine transsexuals here. I'm talking about trans in terms of how it applied to the woke movement. The idea would be that these are people who are victimized. They're born in the wrong bodies, and life has been unfair to them, and all they want is a chance to live their best lives and their normal lives and so on. And plus, these people believe these things. So if you don't go along with the things that they believe politically, then you are oppressing them personally, and you are basically bullying and beating up on somebody who's had a really rough go at life. And this is something that Americans don't like to do. They're fundamentally good people. And so when you hear the story of somebody like Leah Thomas, who says, I feel like I've been trapped in a man's body, and finally I'm liberated and I get my own freedom and I get to enjoy my own truth and so on. People feel sorry for somebody who might have been caught in that situation, so they allow this one individual to take away the dreams of 9 million, high school-aged female athletes at any given time, because the victimhood hierarchy is determined by the far left. And it was determined that, well, being a woman is obviously something that entitles you to some victimhood points, but not as much as being trans, because that's the weaponization of sympathy. That's probably what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, what President Trump said, I can't believe this is a topic of a show. I mean, and maybe it's because I am in my dotage at this point, but can you imagine, like, I was raised by my grandparents, and could you imagine me sitting down in like 1972 and having this conversation with my grandfather and going, you know, Pop, how many sexes are there? You know, like this is such common sense that the fact that the President of the United States has to say, oh, by the way, there are two. I think we've all known this for a long, long time. I mean, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them, and God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, which requires male and female to do that. It's whether you believe that through faith in the scriptures, or whether you believe that through just basic common sense, or whether you believe that through science. The reality is the norm is that there are two sexes. The aberration, or the disability, or that's not really a disability in the sense of the same thing as like losing a leg, but the dysfunctional or the mutated version of that is that people have confusion. Those people, like you said, are generally not running around in the streets saying, recognize me. It's like somebody with one leg saying, I want to be recognized as bipedal. No, it's like you've got one leg. That's just the way you are right now. We'll adapt to that, but we're not going to tell everybody that you have two legs. And so if we give in to the people who demand rights for a condition that really requires therapy, counseling, prayer, compassion, then we actually keep them from getting those things they really need and anchor them in a lie, essentially, that something that can't be true.
This will fix you. Yeah.
Something that cannot be true is suddenly true. And there's another verse in the Bible that says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools.
Well, this weaponized sympathy has a final objective, I think, and that's simply this. There has always been a group of people that wanted to tell other people what to do. Normally, when these people achieve political power, they can do it at point of a gun. But our founding fathers, with their wisdom and foresight, decided to put the barrels of the guns in the hands of the people. So they can't very well just make us do it by force. They have to convince us. They have to basically persuade us. So they use the most powerful psychological effector that there is, and that's social proof. Everybody thinks this way, so you have to think this way. What I think the trans movement really meant from a Marxist theoretical objective is this. There is a universal spectrum among humans of height, skin color, intelligence, speed, strength. All of it is a bell curve spectrum. There's only one thing about humans and mammals and virtually every animal on the earth that is in fact binary, and that is it's sex. Everything else is a spectrum. Some are slightly larger, slightly smaller, but there's only one thing that's an actual binary, and that's sex. And there's only one thing in any population that allows you to go in there and instantly determine which one of these things it is, and that is sex. And my belief is that the left realized that if they could make you take a knee and agree that the most obvious thing to your eyes was not true, if they could get you to agree that what is the single most obvious truth in the world is in fact not true, namely, that a man can magically become a woman because he says, I feel like a woman, I am a woman, therefore we will treat you like a woman. If they could clear that hurdle, then anything after that was gravy, cake, downhill, just coasting. If they could get you to agree that you would take a knee and agree with them that a man can magically become a woman or a woman can magically become a man, then anything after that was simply cake. And they tried it, and they gave it their best shot, and they failed. And they are not going to get a shot like this again. All of the weapons of social proof that they had, things like entertainment, where movie stars would come out and endorse these things. Nobody gives a damn about movie stars anymore. The mainstream media controlling the flow of information. Well, the 2024 election showed that the mainstream media isn't the mainstream media anymore. Joe Rogan is the mainstream media now. The mainstream media is an appendage. It's a legacy item. It's an irrelevancy. It's a historical footnote. They will not get a second chance to do this. This election and this cycle was the fall of Barad-dûr. It was the Dark Tower collapsing to its foundations, and that evil eye of scrutiny and judgment and harassment and victimization and the utilization of your own sympathy and decency against you to force you to your knees has come to an end, and it couldn't happen soon enough for me or anybody else that has a soul to worry about. For Steve Green and Scott Ott, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on Right Angle.